You ever see something so wrong, so far out of line with what you know to be good and decent that your body freezes before your brain catches up, like some part of you refuses to believe the world just shifted underneath your boots? That's what the sound was, not bang, not even shot, just wrongness, like wires snapping inside the world. And in that half second before I saw it, part of me thought maybe it was just truck backfiring or clap of something breaking in the wind. But it wasn't, it was rifle. Thope steady, fired with zero hesitation. And when I rounded the barn, the truth wasn't gentle. My bull Diesel lay on his side near the eastern gate, legs curled under like hippos. He tried to leap something that wasn't there, dust still swirling where he fell, blood seeping fast into the dirt, pooling in ways no man should have to see from creature he raised by hand. And there she was, Karen Baldwin, president of the HOA, pillar of the subdivision, migraine. Standing 5 paces away, gun still warm in her hands, the sling resting casually on her shoulder like it was part of some neighborhood walk. Her mouth didn't twist in guilt, didn't even flinch. Instead, she looked at me like I was late to meeting she'd scheduled weeks ago. I had no choice, she said flatly. Her voice didn't quiver, no shake, no panic, like she was reading off menu. He startled me. Diesel gasped again, his sides pumped like dying machine. My knees hit the dirt before I realized I was kneeling, one hand sinking into the thick wetness of his blood, the other on his neck. Feeling the last fight flicker under his skin, Karen looked down at us with that same bored expression like I was inconveniencing her day. I thought he was hog, she added, like it was some kind of excuse. I've seen ferals around here before. This land is HOA adjacent. I didn't respond, couldn't. My voice was somewhere lost in the back of my throat, buried beneath disbelief and heat and the throb building behind my eyes. You opened the gate, I said finally. That latch was locked yesterday. She shrugged. It was already ajar. Faulty fencing. Probably you've ignored multiple citations. I was just doing my patrol. She smiled at the word patrol like it meant something more than neighborly meddling. You weren't cleared to be here, I said. I am HOA, she replied, like God himself had signed her clipboard. And I'm authorized to enforce community safety. I looked back at Diesel, saw his eyes meeting mine, soft and wide and wet, and I swear he made sound like groan or maybe goodbye. His leg twitched. Karen stepped closer. Honestly, Jack, you should have put him down years ago. That's when it clicked. That's when I knew this wasn't fear. This wasn't mistake. This wasn't panic. This was hit. Cold, clean, calculated. You planned this, I said. She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. You're being dramatic. If you opened that gate, if you'd handled the violations, this wouldn't have happened. I stood slowly, my hands still coated in blood. She took measured step back, not out of fear, out of strategy. Her fingers danced near the rifle sling buckle. Don't escalate this, she warned. It will only make it worse. Behind me, Diesel let out louder, wetter breath. Karen glanced down at him, annoyed. Some creatures don't know when to quit, she muttered. And that's when I hit her. No warning, no plant. Just one deep, dark, buried swing that came from a part of me I hadn't touched since Kandahar. She dropped like sack of feed, rifle falling useless beside her. Her elbow cracked the gravel. Her mouth open, smeared red. She looked at her bloody hand, then smiled. Perfect, she whispered. You just made it criminal. I stood over her, breath stuck somewhere between rage and disbelief. Diesel groaned again behind me. Karen sat up on one elbow. You assaulted an HOA officer. On camera. I blinked. What camera? There's drone over your barn, she said, smug as sin. Check the tree line. And then she said it like she'd rehearsed it for weeks in mirror. Hope you've got lawyer Jack. I didn't respond because I already knew she hadn't just killed my bull. She'd set stage, a laid trap, lured me into war. I didn't know I was already losing. I looked back at Diesel. Still now, silent. His body didn't move except for the way the wind moved around it. Karen stood slowly, brushed off her vest like she was prepping for a press conference. She raised her voice loud and clear as sirens curled through the distance. I feared for my life, she declared. He was running at me. She turned toward the sound of help. Gabe not I'll never forget, and added with hint of glee. I told him you were agitated, threatening me. They're coming to keep me. I looked at her then, really looked, and I saw something most folks miss. The joy some people get from twisting the knife while pretending they're just holding it for safety. And then the sheriff's cruiser came into view, too, actually. But it was the first one that split me wide open. The badge on the door, the man behind the wheel, my son, Caleb. He stepped out, eyes scanning the scene. Diesel dead, Karen bloodied, me standing silent. Karen raised her hand. He struck me, she said. I was filing report. He attacked. Caleb's jaw tightened, not shock, recognition. He'd seen this tactic before, not from her, from other places, other wars. He looked at me, then at the blood, then back at me again. Dad, he said quietly, step back. And I did, not because I agreed, but because I knew that look. I'd worn it once, 1,000 miles away when I was younger, leaner, dumber. It's the look of man trying to figure out who the real enemy is when everyone's speaking the same language but telling different truths. Caleb didn't cuff me. He just opened the cruiser door. You coming? He asked. And I did, not because I trusted him, but because I needed to know if he still trusted me. Some men are born to defend. Others are born to build. I was born to remember. And I remember every word, every look, every second of that day like it was tattooed on my bones. It was in that moment, standing in the dirt where Diesel died, I realized something deeper than betrayal, more haunting than grief. I realized I was up against a system that didn't need to prove me guilty. It only needed to make me look dangerous. And if you're a man past 60 in this country, living quiet, holding land, trying to outlive your regrets, you already know the truth I learned that day. They don't need to shoot you to take your life. They just need a reason. And Karen Baldwin just gave him one. They didn't put me in cuffs that night, but they didn't have to. The cold metal of silence did the job better. I sat in the back of Caleb's cruiser with the smell of blood still in my hands and the feel of Diesel's last breath still clinging to my shirt. He didn't speak the whole drive, not word. And I didn't ask, because there's kind of silence between men who've both seen too much, and the only thing worse than breaking it is pretending it's not there. At the station, they put me in small interview room, no glass, no recording light, just cheap table chair that groaned when I sat down, and folder with my name on it like gravestone. I stared at it for a long while. Maybe if I didn't open it, it wouldn't be real. But real doesn't wait for permission. Caleb finally came in. Still no words. He didn't look like cop then. He looked like my boy again. The same jawline he got from his mother. Same eyes that used to light up when I brought him toy trucks from deployment. But those eyes now, they carried something heavier, like he was holding back verdict only I knew was coming. She filed charges this morning, he said finally, before the shot. I asked. He nodded. 3 hours before. That sat in the room like corpse. No one touched it, because we both knew what it meant. This wasn't defense. This wasn't panic. This was choreography. Heron had written the ending before the scene even started, and I was just following the script she laid out. I didn't sleep in holding, just sat there with migraine made of memory. Thought about the time in 9 when a man named Ramirez tried to get me court-martialed for calling out bad order. I remembered the look he gave me when he smiled with all his teeth and said, "You made the wrong enemy." That was Karen now. Same grin, different battlefield. I got out in the morning. No charges pressed yet. Just pending investigation. Eddie picked me up in the truck. She didn't ask questions, just handed me coffee and drove. That's woman who knows when man's too full of fire to speak. It wasn't until we turned onto Route 7 that she finally said, "You want crowbar with that coffee." I gave half smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. When we got home, the war had already moved to our front porch. 2 HOA officers, matching polos, smug as hell, were filming our fence line with GoPros strapped to their chests. One of them had a clipboard like it was a badge. They didn't even acknowledge us as we pulled in, just kept measuring post depth and mumbling about reflective index violations. I didn't know paint could be too shiny, but apparently our barn's new coat offended the sun. Inside, the mail was stacked like that. Bills, citations, and one certified letter with crisp gold logo, Baldwin and Crane Law Associates. I opened it with steak knife. Inside, $1 million civil complaint, emotional distress, violation of HOA codes, threat to public safety. A draft press release already written, labeling me as a volatile ex-soldier with history of confrontations. They weren't just trying to punish me, they were trying to rewrite who I was. That night, Caleb showed up again. Didn't knock, just walked in like the son he used to be, not the deputy he had to play now. He stood in the living room with file in his hand, jaw tight. "You know, she filed motion to have me removed as sheriff," he said. I blinked. "She's scared you'll remember who your family is." He didn't answer. Just laid the file on the table. Inside, drone footage, edited clips, timestamps out of order, and a narrative that painted me as the aggressor. She'd even inserted background music on one clip. I couldn't tell if it was more insulting or strategic. "You need to stop," Caleb said. "Before this goes federal, she shot my bull. She filed first. She planned the gate. Doesn't matter to him. It looks like you snapped." I did snap, I admitted, and if I had to do it again, I'd swing harder. Eddie walked in just then, drying mug with towel. "Then swing again," she said. "Just do it smarter." The next morning, I found note taped to our gate handwritten, elegant cursive. "Tell your wife to stop making threats. Next time I'll respond in kind." No signature, but I knew that handwriting, Karen's brand of charm school menace. I didn't show Eddie, just walked straight to the barn, dug out crate marked, "Do not open unless it's war." Inside, An old camera rig I hadn't touched since training locals overseas. Night vision lens, thermal scope, hidden mics. If they wanted to film me, fine. We'd both roll tape. 2 days later, a padded envelope showed up on our back porch. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a photo of Karen standing behind our paddock with a rifle. But what made my stomach twist was the angle. It was taken from the sheriff's department's back stairwell. I called Caleb. He didn't answer. Tried again, straight to voicemail. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just land dispute. This was infiltration. Someone on the inside was feeding her. Maybe it was Luke, the ranch hand I'd taken in during the spring floods. Maybe it was worse. Either way, I knew now. I wasn't just being watched. I was being built into story. I didn't sleep that night. Just walked the perimeter, checked the cameras, reset the motion sensors. Around 2:17 a.m., I caught Chait moving at the edge of the eastern fence, too tall for coyote, too smooth for an animal. I moved in low, boots crunching gravel soft, and I saw it. Luke bent by the low rail, attaching something black and boxy. He didn't even flinch when I called his name, just turned slowly like he'd been waiting. I can explain, he said. In the barn, I replied. Eddie met us there. Caleb showed up minutes later. We didn't tie him up. We didn't scream. We just stood still until the silence got so loud he had to fill it. Karen had paid him off the books, told him she was gathering documentation, said it was all legal. But then came the suggestions. When to reset cameras, when to unlock gates, how to stand so the drone caught the right angle. I didn't know she'd shoot, he said. She told me it was just leverage. I didn't believe him, but I didn't need to. I needed her to believe he was still loyal, so we let him go. Put the tracker on his truck. Marked every call. This now we weren't reacting. We were building. That night I got text from block number. Hope you wappos are enjoying the show. Next episode drops soon. I didn't respond. Just printed it out, stapled it to the wall above the war table in the barn. Karen thought she was filming documentary. What she didn't realize was she was starring in her own indictment, and I was done playing defense. You see, there's something they don't tell you in war stories. It's not the bullets that break you, it's the paperwork, the accusations, the lies that get filed before the truth even gets a chance to stand up. But I filed things too, and the next one I submit won't be complaint. It'll be an obituary for her legacy, for her empire, for her script. Because if she wants to make me villain, she better write hell a better ending, one where I stay dead. And I don't plan on dying anytime soon. I hadn't cried since my mother's funeral, not when my first dog died, not when I left for my first deployment, not even when I stood over Diesel's body, hand buried in the warmth, leaving his side. But I'll tell you what nearly broke me, finding single metal stake driven into my eastern field with one word stamped into the side. Baldwin, no court order, no formal notice, no hearing, just piece of cold steel slammed into my land. Lagon conquered territory. They didn't take me to court. They took me to memory. And they started rewriting it. I dug around it with my hands first, like maybe there was something underneath, something that would make sense of the insanity. But there was only dirt and a scrap of ribbon tied in neat red silk, fluttering like it was proud to be there. I pulled the stake up with one hard tug, and under it I found blackened ash, burned paper, melted fragments of plastic. It wasn't trash. It was mine, what used to be mine. Map fragment here, label from survey tube there. A half-melted corner of a photo I'd taken of my father holding deed like it meant something. They hadn't just planted claim. They torched my past. Eddie found me an hour later, sitting in the dirt, the stake still in my hand, the ash smeared across my jeans. She didn't speak at first, just knelt beside me and picked up one of the scorched papers. Her fingers moved like they were handling dead bird. This isn't vandalism, she finally said. This is removal. Erasure, I nodded, because I knew it. Karen wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting to disappear me. That night I climbed into the attic and pulled down the oldest box I owned. It smelled like old wood and mold and something else. Something like secrets. Inside were rolls of brittle tax forms, yellowed maps, faded correspondence, but buried in the middle, wrapped in wax paper, was an envelope I hadn't touched in decades, my father's handwriting across the front. Grange Dispute 83. I opened it slowly, fingers stiff. Inside was photo, grainy and overexposed. 2 men shouting in dry field. One of them was my father. The other I recognized from Karen's old campaign mailers, Earl Baldwin, her father, and there was history repeating itself. My father's finger was jabbing into Earl's chest. Behind him, crooked fence post, the same one that still sits on my east line, on the back of the photo, noted my father's hand. Survey line contested. No contact after this. That line hit me like hammer. No contact, like the fight had cost more than land. Maybe pride, maybe blood. I showed it to Eddie. She studied it, then looked me dead in the eye. She's not just trying to take the ranch, she said. She's trying to finish something her father started. I spent the next 3 days in county records, squinting through dusty microfilm and scanned archives that hadn't been touched since Reagan was in office. Most of it was dead ends, vague language, redacted names, resolved in settlement notes with no detail. But then in Forgotten Agriculture Digest from 1985, I found it, short article titled, Fence Fight Turns Ugly in Grange County. Names were blacked out, but the date, the field look, the circumstances, they all matched. The Baldwins filed the first claim. My father challenged it. The court overturned it due to lack of physical survey evidence, but one clerk's note stood out like gunshot in chapel. Applicant dispute escalated. Hostile exchange, quiet resolution suspected. Quiet resolution. I knew what that meant. Somebody pulled string. Somebody buried record. And now that ghost was back wearing smile and clipboard. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at the ceiling fan while Eddie lay beside me, her breathing steady, calm like an anchor I didn't deserve. I kept hearing my father's voice from old memories, telling me the land remembers even when people don't. The next morning, I found another stake. 15 feet from Diesel's grave. This one was fresh, paint still wet, a laminated tag stapled to the post. Pending reallocation, Baldwin Family Trust. I ripped it out and burned it right there in coffee can. Buried the ashes beneath Diesel's resting place. But I knew I couldn't burn what was coming next. Later that afternoon, Roy showed up, friend from convoy days turned private surveyor. He still owed me from the time I pulled him out of a flip MRAP. We walked the field in silence. Roy measured, marked, cross-checked satellite overlays. Then he stopped and shook his head. She shifted the line, he said, by 21 feet. He pointed to the barn. That colt you got, buckshot? According to this map, he's not on your land anymore. The breath left my lungs like someone had hit me with shovel. Buckshot, jet black, Diesel's only bloodline, barely a year old. I'd raised him since birth, watched him nuzzle Eddie's apron, let Caleb's boy name him after comic book, and now with one forged map and filed motion, they were trying to make him property of someone else. That wasn't just theft, that was desecration. That night we set up camp by the barn, chairs, coffee, floodlights. Luke stayed inside, watching feeds. Eddie refused to go to bed. She sat by me with her boots on and her hand on my knee. Around 2:06 a.m., the motion sensor tripped. 2 figures, 1 truck. Then Karen's little errand boy, and county inspector with badge too clean to be real. They started unrolling fence wire like it was routine, like it had already been decided. I stepped into the light and said, "You're trespassing." Denny froze. The inspector didn't. "We're observing land adjustment under state code," he said. Caleb pulled up seconds later, cruiser lights off, badge gleaming. "And you're violating court freeze," he said. The inspector hesitated. "I have jurisdiction." Caleb stepped closer. "You have nerve. That's what you have." Denny looked at me, sweat glistening. "She said if I finished the post, I'd be back on the deed." I lowered my rifle, but didn't move. "You're building someone else's life," I said. "She told me you stole it," he muttered. "That your dad did." Roy stepped forward and showed him the overlay. It shifted line. Word stamp, GPS bug on private soil. "Want to tell the press how you got that approved." They left quiet, no words. But they left something behind. The next morning, the barn door was open. No prints, no footage, just cut rope and an empty stall. Buckshot was gone. His lead was sliced clean, a business card lay beside the feed bin. Baldwin Family Holdings, returned to rightful range. I didn't yell, didn't throw punch. I walked to the barn wall and hit it twice with my bare hand. The splinters dug deep, didn't care. Eddie sat down on the hay bale, whispering. She took him. Then she screamed. Quiet, guttural sound like her soul was being wrung dry. And that's when I broke. Not in the way they wanted, not into submission. Into something older, something sharper. I went into the barn's back room, opened the old black box I swore I'd never open again, and took out the route book, the field radio, the encrypted drive. Because they didn't just take my bull. They took the last clean part of what this land meant, and now I was done playing defense. You see, you can rebuild barn, you can replant field, but you can't unburn memory. And when someone tries to steal your past, your name, your bloodline, there's only one left to do. You don't fight for revenge. You fight because some truths are older than maps. Some lines can't be redrawn, and some men don't disappear, they reload. The first thing I did was lock every gate, not just the new ones. Every single one, even the ones I hadn't used since the floods 3 springs ago. I nailed boards across openings, changed padlocks, ran wire through hinges, and added motion sensors linked straight to burner laptop. I kept off the grid. If Karen wanted to draw lines, she was going to run face first into mine. She didn't just take my bull. She didn't just brand my land with her family's name. She tried to rewrite me out of my own story. So now I was going to do the one thing no tyrant with fake smile and clipboard ever expects. I was going to tell the truth, all of it, and I was going to make damn sure everyone heard it. I started with the files Luke had pulled off her cloud, names, payments, timestamps. Shell company for landscaping that didn't exist. Thousands moved under the table, rerouted through 3 PO boxes, all stamped with the same initials. BIF, Baldwin Youth Enrichment Fund. The name alone would make decent man spit. There were checks issued from HOA reserves, funneled as community development grants, and deposited back into Karen's personal accounts. Some labeled speaker honorariums, others marked as an environmental beautification. But the kicker, one invoice, $8,200. For drone equipment, line item. Property oversight system fits omen to it printed everything. 3 copies. One for the press, one for the state attorney general, one for fire insurance in case the first 2 mysteriously vanished. Eddie helped me bind them, label the folders, and store the backups. She didn't ask where I got half the files. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Don't wait too long." She was right, because by then Karen had already filed temporary guardianship claim. Said I was mentally unfit, unstable, and danger to agricultural assets. Claimed I was suffering from PTSD delusions and couldn't differentiate between threats and livestock. I laugh when I read the wording, danger to the agricultural landscape. That's what they called me, not man, not veteran. Danger, like I was fault line waiting to crack open the whole belly. But I wasn't cracking. I was preparing, because war doesn't always start with bullets. Sometimes it starts with paperwork, but it still ends the same way, one person standing, the other buried. So we staged it right. Caleb contacted Amanda, the one remaining HOA board member who hadn't drunk the Kool-Aid. We sent her a formal invitation, reconciliation meeting. On neutral ground, signed politely, professionally, like we still believed the system worked. But this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about exposure. Roy helped wire the meeting room. Mic under the table, camera in the vent, backup feed mounted behind the light switch. Luke delivered the invitation himself. KRFC 2 hours later, gladly she wrote, "It's time we clear this up." I smiled when I read that, because when someone like her wants to clear something up, it means she thinks she's already won. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep, sat in the living room in my church jacket, the one I hadn't worn since my mother's funeral, just staring at the fireplace. There was a photo of my dad on the mantel holding me as a baby with a cigarette behind one ear and a fencing hammer in the other. I remembered what he told me once after the droughts of '78. They don't steal land, Jack. They steal your name off the land. Same thing, hurts worse. Eddie came in quietly, barefoot, mug of tea in her hands. She sat beside me and didn't say anything for a while. Then finally she asked, "You sure you're not doing this for revenge?" I looked at her. "I'm sure. Are you sure it won't feel like revenge?" That part I wasn't sure about. But I was past the point of needing to know. The meeting started quiet. Amanda showed up first, tired but upright. Then Karen walked in like she owned the room. Pearl earrings, clipboard, white coat. She even brought her own bottled water. She sat down like she was preparing to host press conference. "Let's keep this civil," she said, as if she hadn't torched my barn and kidnapped my colt. We nodded. I started with the basics. Fence disputes, violation notices, miscommunication. She smiled through all of it, as if none of it touched her. Amanda took notes. Eddie sat silent. Then I slid the first folder across the table. "These are records of financial misappropriation," I said. "Funds rerouted from community projects to unregistered organizations, all tied to you." Karen didn't even flinch. "Those are false accusations," she said. "We'll need more than printouts to make that stick." I nodded and opened the second folder. Inside, GRA notices, flag dines, forensic trails. "These charities don't exist," I said. "They're ghost accounts." Still nothing. No twitch, no blink. Let the men lean forward, lips parting slightly. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a voice recorder, and hit play. Karen's voice crackled through the speaker. "If we push him hard enough, he'll punch. All we need is the moment. Then the narrative writes itself." That got her. Just flicker. Her left hand gripped the edge of her clipboard tighter. Amanda closed her notebook. "That your voice?" she asked. Karen smirked. "Out of context. Could be anyone." "Then why are you sweating?" Eddie asked calmly. Karen stood up. "This is farce. Smear job." I looked at her. "You forged elections. Fake claims. Framed me for felony." Oh. She stepped forward close enough I could see the crack in her lipstick. "You're still nothing but placeholder," she said. "This land dies with you." That's when Caleb stepped into the room from behind the curtain. "Not today," he said. "You've been served." 3 days later, federal charges dropped like bricks. Wire fraud, perjury, criminal misappropriation. Karen's face showed up on every ducking questions, hiding behind trench coat, her famous clipboard nowhere in sight. Amanda took over as interim president. First act, vote to rescind all pending actions against my property. Second act, initiate an independent audit. Third act, reinstate Caleb as full sheriff with unanimous board support. But Karen didn't go quietly. That's the thing about people like her. They don't believe in losing, they believe in regrouping. So when the trailer showed up half-mile from our fence line, abandoned, doors swinging in the wind, I already knew what was inside. Buckshot, skinny, but alive. When I opened the gate, he didn't run. He walked straight to me and nudged my pocket like nothing had changed. I didn't cry. I just knelt and whispered, "Good boy." We rebuilt the barn, poured new concrete over the east line and embedded plaque. Carter 1985. Roy helped survey it. Caleb helped dig. Eddie planted clover around Diesel's grave. Amena stopped by once with a notarized letter. Full restoration of historical boundaries. No loopholes. No footnotes. Karen took plea deal. 10 years. No parole, no press, no legacy. Just silence. But not the kind she used as weapon. The kind that grows like moss. Quiet, slow, permanent. I didn't smile when it ended. I didn't celebrate. I sat on the porch with Eddie, coffee in one hand, buckshot grazing nearby, and I said, "You think it's over?" She looked at me, eyes soft but sharp. "If it is, we won." I nodded, not because I felt like victor, but because I still had my land, my name. And every time the wind moved through the east field, I could still hear Diesel breathing. Some people fight for power. Others fight for memory. And when memory becomes dangerous, that's when you know you're telling the truth. The wind shifted that morning. You know that feeling? When the air gets heavy before storm, like something old is waking up beneath the soil. I felt it before I even opened my eyes. Eddie was already up, brewing coffee like always, but there was stiffness to her movement. I heard it in the way the spoon clinked the mud. She didn't have to say it. I knew something was coming, and I was right. It's 7:16 a.m. Plain envelope slid under our front gate. No return address, no stamp. Inside, photocopy of 1949 Carter property survey. Except it wasn't ours. The boundaries were redrawn, shifted just enough to make my east pasture look like borrowed land. Attached was a notarized claim from a rural office 2 counties over, filed under the Baldwin Family Trust. Title: Pending reallocation under legacy dispute. I stared at the paper for a long time, then laid it flat on the table, the coffee growing cold in my hand. "She's trying to refile history," I said. Caleb came by an hour later, uniform still dusty from patrol. He read the document twice, lips tight, eyes hard. "She found judge," he muttered, "or someone who thinks they're one." According to him, if Karen could prove reasonable claim with physical presence, like fence post structure, anything she could call stake in the land, she could trigger freeze. That meant months of litigation, land and limbo livestock barred from use, and me fighting ghosts in courtrooms where the dead don't speak. Eddie was silent, staring at the wall like she was trying to remember something important she'd forgotten to say for years. "You mean if she puts up fence, she can lock it down?" she asked. Even with no title, Caleb nodded. "If the judge bites, yeah." I walked outside, looked across the east field where the wind had always blown clean. I saw Diesel's grave. I saw the barn rebuilt with our hands. And I saw the patch of land where Buckshot had run free before all this madness. "She doesn't want to win in court," I said. "She wants me to lose in memory." That night it happened. Flashlights in the distance. Barking motion sensor pinged at 3:09 a.m. I grabbed my coat, boots, rifle. Eddie was already ahead of me. Luke came behind with a crowbar. Caleb flanked the brush line. We didn't speak. We moved like unit, like we trained for this. Not just in war, but in marriage, in blood, in the stubborn rituals of survival. We found the site, shovel half buried. Crate beside it inside. Coiled barbed wire, fresh. Blinking GPS tracker duct taped to stake, ribbon fluttering from the handle with the words, "Property Division, Baldwin West." Eddie looked at me, voice like dry gravel. "She's prepping to sell it. She's carving it off in pieces." I made one call, Roy. He showed up at dawn, dust on his jeans, coffee, and a thermos, eyes already sharp. He walked the line again, mapped the coordinates. "She shifted the boundary by exactly 21 feet, he said. "Just enough to dispute, not enough to look obvious." He pointed at the barn. "And that cold of yours. Technically, she's claiming he was never yours." My hands clenched without meaning to. That wasn't just power play. That was desecration. Buckshot was Diesel's blood, my legacy, my line. You don't take men's blood and call it paperwork. You don't steal name and call it legal. That evening, we built watch posts by the barn, chairs, thermals, infrared cams, silent walkie-talkies. And he didn't speak much, just handed me flashlight and flask. Caleb brought trail mix and file with notarized counterclaims. Luke fixed the wiring. twice, rechecked the signal strength. At 2:06 a.m. it happened, headlights in the distance, truck rolled and slow. Quiet, like they knew we were watching. Two figures, Denny and someone else, men in county inspector boots, clipboard badge, too clean to belong here. They started rolling wire along the fence line, fast and deliberate. I stepped into the floodlight, Eddie beside me, Caleb behind. Luke to my left, crowbar slung over his shoulder. Denny froze. The inspector didn't. Land adjustment under state code, he said. Caleb stepped forward. You're violating an active freeze. The inspector flashed badge like it meant something. I have jurisdiction. Caleb's voice went steel. Not here, you don't. Denny looked at me. She said this was always hers, he muttered. She said your dad stole it. Roy stepped forward with the overlays. You want to see forged documents? He asked. We've got maps, GPS evidence, witness affidavits. The inspector turned, walked off without word. Denny followed, but not before looking at me with something that looked an awful lot like regret. At sunrise, we found the barn door open. Again, no sign of forced entry, no camera footage, just broken latch and lead rope cleanly sliced. Buckshot was gone, card left behind. Baldwin family holdings, returned to rightful range. I didn't scream, I didn't curse. I walked into the stall where Diesel used to rest and sat on the ground. Eddie found me there shaking. She knelt beside me and said something I hadn't heard since my mother died. You don't have to do this alone, but I did, as it wasn't about land anymore. It wasn't about bull or colt or line drawn wrong. It was about memory, identity, legacy. Karen didn't want property. She wanted to erase the Carter name from every corner of this county and replace it with her own. She didn't want me gone. She wanted me never to have existed. And I was done tolerating it. That afternoon, a trailer showed up near the west fence, unmarked, dumped like trash inside. Buckshot, ribs showing, hoof bruised, but alive. He didn't run. He walked right to me and pushed his nose into my chest, and I broke, but not in silence. I broke into something fierce. Eddie cried for the first time in weeks. Luke said nothing, just knelt and checked the Colt's leg. Caleb stood back making notes, but I saw him wipe his eyes once. We poured concrete over the last Baldwin stake, set a steel plate in the middle. Carter 1985, not because it won anything, but because it meant we hadn't left. That land wasn't saved by courts, it was saved by staying, by remembering. Karen didn't get her hearing. She took deal. 10 years, no appeal, no camera crews, just footnote. And I stayed where I'd always been. Right here, breathing, remembering. Some people think land is just dirt, but land remembers who stood on it when everything else was trying to push them off, and so do I.